Guess who's back?
Back.
Back again.
Guess who's back?
No, okay. Welcome back to another episode of MB2 Underground. We were trying to spice it up for you today.
That's my favorite rapper. I needed a little bit of pre.
You said that's your
pre-gaming on
favorite
that.
rapper?
Yeah.
We're so off.
No, what are you talking? That's Eminem.
Yeah, but I'm just saying in the musical cadence that we had, you were off.
Oh, I was way off. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that.
Sorry. But yes, I'm Sarah Kiefer, joined with Joe Fox. I guess we could do introductions. How's it going, Joe?
It is going fantastic, my friend. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Today is a particularly special day for me because I don't know many people that get to interview their boss.
Yeah, don't screw this one up.
Sarah, don't cry. There's a lot of crying in our relationship.
I cry a lot.
Oh my God, I can't wait to hear about this. We do need to.
Good crying.
Yeah.
We definitely do need to up our game, though.
We talked about this. Like, she's not my boss in here.
That's right. You're not the boss of me.
You're not the boss of me.
So yeah, we have to up our game.
Okay.
We've got a rock star in our midst. And just really quickly, if you just give me a minute to dote a little bit. 24 years of finance experience as an investment banker, as in the hedge fund world. I've worked for a whole lot of very intelligent, very driven, very successcul people
Okay,
in my 24
I'm sorry, Joe.
years.
For a second, I thought you were doing my introduction, and he said 24 years of finance experience, and I'm like, that's not in my bio.
I was like, that's the next one. No.
Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
So
that's you. You're giving your bio.
me.
Keep doting.
Yeah.
Joe's
Anyway,
giving his bio.
In those 24 years of finance experience, I have yet to meet anybody who is more organized and more detail-oriented than our guest
Oh, you're telling me.
today. So, without further ado, the MB2 office mom, the Buckeye State's favorite daughter, Pearl Jam Uber fan, and
Yes.
super mom, the chief of staff of MB2 Dental, Miss Susan Huff. Welcome, friend.
Yes. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. This is a proud mom moment. So Joe and I have worked together for a couple of years.
And sit next to each other.
And we
now.
sit next to each other. Well, Joe stands, I sit, because, we don't have offices here.
Mm-hmm.
And Sarah, Joe, you probably know this. I asked Sarah to join the integration team in 2018.
Yeah.
She had been with MB2 for just over 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Her MB2 anniversary is in June of 2016. Her birthday's in September. And
This is not my podcast.
she joined us, and now she's gone from the integration team, starting as a director to senior director to vice president. And I asked her to leave the integration team and join us in founding the owner transitions team. So we've got a lot of owners that transition equity, and we got to get more organized about that.
Very important job. Very important role.
Super important. And now, in addition to that, she's the host
Crushing
of
it on
the
podcast.
Underground.
Yep.
It's
I feel
awesome.
like if I ever do, if I'm ever the guest, I need Susan to do my intro.
And we will.
That's pretty dope.
So
Not that you don't do it well, but
Susan, you have such incredible experience with developing processes and team building. This is a great example, right? Like one of your little babies is flying out of the nest.
Yes.
And I can't wait to get into all that and to hear more and ask some really fun, detailed questions. But the thing that always blows me away when I talk to female executives, right, female entrepreneurs, is who also happen to be mamas, is their ability to be rock star mamas at the same time as they're rock star executives, right? My opinion, moms make the world go round. Every Father's Day, I feel guilty because being a dad's kind of easy. And so being a mom isn't. But how are you able, you have 4 awesome, thriving kiddos. We've hung out, I met them, met your husband. How are you able to balance that? How are you able to do that and still be a rock star here at MB2?
So something you said earlier was, how do you be a mama and
why are we saying mama?
how do you be a mom?
Thank you.
Mom. No, actually it went mama, mommy, mom, bruh.
Bruh.
Hey, bruh.
That's the age that they're at now.
Bruh.
Unreal.
Yo, bro.
I'm
So
not
should
ready
we
for
update
that.
this to office bruh?
Yeah, I like that. Office bruh. So you asked me, how do you be a mom and an executive? And to you, that was like an and statement. Like, how do you be both? And I've had a lot of conversations with men and women throughout my career about how they can have a family and achieve what they want to achieve professionally. And for me, there is zero balance. I don't subscribe to it. It doesn't make sense for me. And it makes sense for a lot of other people, but it just doesn't for me. And so for me, it's a blend. So when I come into the office at MB2, I don't turn my family off. And when I leave the MB2 office, I don't turn MB2 off.
Yep.
Right.
And so I have conversations with my family about my work. I'm checking in on them. There's some times that I might have to like come in early or leave late. But when I'm at home, I'm also cooking dinner, answering a conference, on a conference call, maybe jump on a Zoom. I'm, checking an email later, and it doesn't make me distracted, but for me, it just blends it all together. And I'm a better mom because I can be a mom all the time.
Yep.
And I'm better in my leadership role because I can be a leader all the time.
You're chief of staffing at home and you're momming at work.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mama in.
And I have a really supportive husband.
Yeah.
So
That's a big
in
deal.
some marriages, like you don't talk to your husband or your spouse or your wife about work stuff. Like you kind of like leave it at work. Like, you know how the old saying, like leave your problems at the door, whether you're coming to work or coming into your home. And that's just not the case. Like vent and allow him to know every part of me, not just the part that's the wife and the mom at home. So having a really supportive husband and having a family that knows that like my life is all blended together is how I stay sane and like keep all this moving forward.
Yeah, me too.
That's the first time I've ever heard that perspective, and it's genius.
Yeah.
It's absolutely genius. Because I think there's a lot of stress as a parent to like completely, separate those things and
You would
block
know.
those
You have
things out.
1,000 kids.
Just a few.
Joe has one more than me, but mine are teenagers. So I've got
All at once.
8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. All the things
I'm
happening.
not ready for bra. I'm not ready
Bra.
for that.
I'll start. I'll just warm you up. I'll say bra on our next episode. So let's go backwards a little bit. Tell us more about how you got into the dental profession specifically.
Okay, so dentistry has been a part of my life just because it sort of presented itself in my childhood. So my childhood dentist was a neighbor down the street.
Okay.
And I babysat his 3 kids. So I'm like in 5th grade and I'm babysitting 3 kids, one of which is a baby. And that's just how I grew up.
That's
like,
what you did in the 80s.
That's what you did in the 80s.
Right. I love it.
And one of his sons grew up to be a dentist.
Aw.
And then his wife was my confirmation sponsor. So if you're Catholic, you go through different sacraments. And around the 7th, 8th grade, you go through something called confirmation and you need a sponsor. So she was. So I had a close relationship with my childhood dentist. And I am a child of the 80s. And so I remember spitting in the bowl. That was like in the chair. And my dentist did not wear gloves. So I remember what his hands felt like in my mouth, doing my dental work.
Was that common back then to not wear gloves? I don't remember that.
It was where I'm
Where
from.
you're from?
I wonder if that's where like how some people are afraid of or don't love going to the dentist comes from, is like people sticking their bare hands in your mouth.
Interesting.
Well, it
think
had
I'd
a
like
very
that.
medicinal smell when you walked in, and you could hear the drills, and it was, it was kind of scary. And then you've also got, the ungloved hands, but I am also very healthy, and so I thought maybe exposure to germs helped me later in life because I literally never get sick.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. When's the last
awesome.
when's the last time you got sick or you ran a fever? It was like 1996.
yes, actually, 1997 was the last time I had a fever.
I got sick for like 3 straight months, and she kept saying that, and I'm
love
like,
it.
"That's great. I love that for you.
What were
I'm
you-
dying."
What were you doing in 1997, Miss Kiefer?
Oh, I was like barely around,
Yeah.
watching Barney.
Yep. But, oh my gosh, stop.
So my childhood dentist. And then when I got older, we have a family friend that lives in Scottsdale, a dentist, and he was adopting a baby, had a 2-year-old. And so I went out for a summer and was his nanny. And so I didn't work in his office, but it was like a dentist family friend. That really didn't have a direct effect on me getting a job in dentistry. It just sort of showed up in my life at a young age. And then on October 5th of 2001,
Can we pause and just make sure, if anybody listening to this does not know that Susan is the date queen, she literally knows the date that she started working in dentistry.
And probably not just the date, the day of the week it was.
well, I'd have to Google that.
yeah, but like how cool that you're
Probably a Monday.
Makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. So October 5th of 2001, I got my first job in dental. So I've been working since I've been 10 years old, nonstop, which we can go back to that. But I got a job at a very busy dental practice in Norwich, Connecticut. Wow. And I brought today a little memento from my time there. You can see
Scrapbooking.
my dog, I think,
Scrapbooking.
chewed a little bit of the side of this.
Oh my gosh.
But I worked in this practice for 3 years. And when I
Wait,
was
can I see it
Yeah,
while
when
you're
I was
talking?
finishing my time here, the team gave me a
love it.
scrapbook.
Oh my God,
And
look at baby
this,
Susan.
This is me. I moved to Texas in 2004. And so this was probably sometime in the spring or summer of that year. So this is 20 years ago. That was me 20 years ago.
Unreal.
And
How cool.
what was your first role in a dental practice?
I worked at the front desk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was that?
Oh, I loved it.
I bet you did.
Interactions with people, multitasking, getting to know the team, finding the regulars, getting into like your regular routine. So when I moved from Texas,
I'm just going to show the camera.
I know.
I don't know how it looks.
I'm probably 20.
But she's a baby.
I know. No, I'm not 20. I'm 24 there. That was 20 years ago. I'm 24 there. So when I moved from Connecticut to Texas, and I was in like my early mid 20s, I said, I'm never working for a dental practice again.
Why?
I loved my experience, but there was something in me that needed to grow and expand. And in my mind at that time, a dental practice had no growth or expansion.
It had a ceiling.
Yeah, it has ceiling. That's all I knew. I didn't know DSO or consolidation. And so I moved to Texas and I didn't know anyone. And besides the boyfriend I was with, and I was like, okay, I've never not had a job since I was 10 years old. So I'm going to get a job at a dental practice and I'm going to build my resume and network in Dallas. And I'm going to take my first step out of dentistry into like a corporate setting. And I got a job that was part of a DSO. And I didn't know that. I didn't understand the concept.
Right.
And I worked there for almost 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I worked out of operations into corporate departments and left running a lot of different departments. And I came to MB2 over 9 years ago.
Unreal.
Yeah. So I've been in dentistry, let's see, it's 2024. I've been in dentistry for 23 years.
And you got the exposure to the full spectrum of dentistry in that time too.
Yep.
Unreal. You are the queen of process, right? And you have some really cool perspectives on developing processes and like implementing them and then like following through on
Streamlining
those.
and efficiencies and workflows and one-pagers. And
Can you talk about that? I mean, it's really, really special. And again, what I said earlier about 24 years of finance and you being the most detail-oriented and organized, that's a big part of it is like, wow, right? The guides and all the things. Can you tell us about that and how you developed those over time and where you came up with that?
So I think part of it is I'm hardwired. Like it is in my DNA.
nature versus nurture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So even just being able to speak in front of a group or reiterate a message. So in my baby book, my mom had written.
Did you bring that for us?
I should have brought it. In my baby
Next
book,
time.
my mom had written a little notation. And when you're young, like in the Catholic Church, you go to Sunday school. So your parents like put you in the basement of the church when you're a toddler, and they go
not
to
that bad.
church. Yeah, put you in the basement.
CCD, yeah.
You go to church in the base, or you go to class in the basement, and they go to church and they come get you. So basically, like daycare during church, but they call it Sunday school. And you go down there like when you're like 2, 3, 4 years old, and so. I guess I maybe was around 3 years old, and my mom had written in the baby book, "Oh, I went and peeked on Susan in Sunday school to make sure she was okay, and she was up talking in front of the class.
Oh my gosh.
I think she's a good public speaker."
Wow.
And that's what she wrote in my baby book. So
First presentation at the age of 3. Can kids even talk at that age?
I guess so.
Were you like rapping Bible verses?
I guess,
or-
yeah.
I love
I guess so. So I think part of it is my nature. Like, I'm comfortable publicly speaking. I have a sense of nurture to nurture a team. But a lot of the organization and documentation skills I did learn when I worked for a traditional DSO before I came to MB2.
Yeah.
It was a great place to grow up and learn from an operations perspective.
Yeah.
I learned how to strategic plan, read P&Ls. I learned how to like write a process. And then it's just practice and refinement over time and never achieving the end result. Like always process improving, always tinkering around. And the more I've done it, I've really refined those skills at MB2 and been able to help other areas outside of some of the departments that I lead to help them understand how important it is that if it's not written, it's not true.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of technology now that could be
Yeah.
used. Like I'm a little old school, like I still take my notes in a notebook and everything's written out into like a process checklist. But the same concept applies. And I learned that from one of my bosses in my previous organization is that it's not written, it's not true.
Yeah.
So people learn in a lot of different ways, whether it's like I'm sitting next to them showing, I'm having a conversation with them, they need to read it, they need to see it, they need to do it. So writing and documenting is, to me, the only way you really can scale any sort of process or team.
Yeah, even just speaking on behalf of integration, whenever I joined 6 years ago, it was just you, me, and Lindsay.
Yeah.
And by the time I exited, there were 22 integration team members.
Wow.
And in 6 years, building processes that were scalable and trainable so that we can continue to kind of like copy and paste with the tweaks is pretty impressive. And I know I've personally learned a lot. And Joe, with his 24 years of finance, if anybody missed that, has definitely learned.
No, but it's incredible. We have 450 people now between these two buildings ish. And like, as we continue to grow and as your team, has grown, right? Like, to get everyone on the same page, you've got to be that organized. You got to have it all written down.
And we acquired 150 practices last year. That's something that we say like very sort of in passing, like 150 practices. Nonchalant, like, just 150 practices. But when you really think about that and taking 150 businesses and dissecting them and understanding them and documenting current scene and future scene, and then actually integrating them and tying them into MB2 in a way that's seamless, not disruptive. And the outcome is to have our owners make referrals, right? Because like that's part of how we grow our business. It's such a fragile process that can never be overlooked. It can never be something that we just sort of rest on and say we've achieved it and now we're going to move on to something else.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's a disservice.
I still send out 5 to 10 tweaks of our process to the integration team every week with the support of and it's not just me. The entire team is doing this as well. So it's every department that is either under my leadership or that I can help with is focused on like continuous process improvement.
Yeah, I mean, you do such a great job of communicating that learner mindset. Like, hey, we're never going to know everything, right? And we always, every practice we encounter, there's something unique, different, new that we learn.
Right, and to your point, it's an emotional process. So being able to hold that at the same time as the technical skills is, like I said, an art, not a science.
Yeah, and that's what we've really had to educate potential MB2 owners on, is that when you're getting ready to transact, whether it's with MB2 or you're looking at other opportunities out there, it doesn't matter. You have to understand that there's an emotional reaction from your team because these teams are small businesses. And a lot of times they're very ingrained in the culture. They've been around forever. Yep. And when you present them with something that is perceived sometimes as negative, corporate dentistry, you're selling out, you have to understand the emotional reaction of each one of those team members within their roles to then mitigate the risk of potentially losing a key team member or losing the transaction because you've lost the team and get ahead of it from an emotional perspective.
Which enter the team meeting / warm hug. Because when I joined integration, you and Lindsay were just showing up on day one and we're like, paha, we go here now. We were like, I don't think this is the way to do it. So just how even that part of the process has evolved.
Yeah. So we've learned a lot from our owners, our MB2. We have over 700 MB2 owners, and I've been involved in almost all of that. Wow. So we've learned a lot from their experiences, and we just get better every time we acquire a practice, but we're still learning. Yeah. We come across situations that we've never come across before, and we're like, oh man, like, why didn't we ask this question before? Totally. And so it's that learning part never ends.
Yeah. One of my favorite, we didn't ask this question before, questions that we now have is your dental practice also your house? Do you live in your dental practice?
Yes. And do you have a swimming pool in your backyard?
Oh my gosh.
And does our insurance cover the swimming pool in the backyard of the dental practice, which is also the house?
So you have built multiple teams here at MB2. You have also some really cool perspectives on team building. Can you talk to us more about that, your philosophy and kind of how you've done what you've been able to do here? Yeah,
so I lead a few different teams at MB2. Chief of Staff really is a title and a role that allows me to be helpful to a lot of different areas of the business, even outside of the teams that I directly lead. And so providing support and leadership to our facility team that builds de novos and does expansions and remodels, or our HQ team that supports what we do every day here. Our owner transitions team, which is Sarah's team. Which,
shout out.
Yes, shout out, which is helping owners transition their equity to associates, stepping up to become owners. Those are the areas of my direct responsibility. So within those teams, for me, it's important to encourage public praise. So there's a lot of kudos that are done in a public way. And then privately is when the performance action corrective management happens.
That's where I was doing my crying, Joe. Just
Constructive
so
criticism, right? Yeah.
So being consistent with the one-on-ones as well. And so we can get caught up in the day-to-day of our jobs, but as leaders, we owe it to our team members to give them one-on-one time. Wow. So our one-on-ones, and like when Sarah and I meet, it's part catching up on life. So there's a lot of personal conversations that happen about we're both really into our health and longevity. And so we can share our experiences. A lot of my team members read books. I read about 2 books a month. And so we're, talking about books or travel or whatever other hobbies we're talking about. Yeah. And so I'm checking in with them on an emotional and personal level. Yeah. And then we're diving into like what's happening from a technical perspective of their job and how can I be there to help them critically think and navigate through that. So if I rarely did that, I wouldn't have a sense of community and culture within my teams. So I think making sure that you're, as a leader, like checking in with people, and it's a lot for me to do. So it can be, I'm going to say draining, but it takes a lot of time and resource to give that to your people, but you owe it to them. Like that's why you're in a leadership position. And then going back to clarity. So my job in my departments is to make sure everyone is super clear on what their responsibilities are, that there's accountability around that, which is why you have to document, because then you can reference back to that writing. Yep. And then give them the resources to be successful, whether it's me helping them or giving them exposure to other departments or maybe mentors outside of MB2. So clarity and resources is really where I try to, keep my compass in the right direction for the team.
Love it. Love it. And then there's that concept of blending again, right? As
I was just thinking
balance,
the same thing.
Right? How cool. But
I can see it
special.
in action.
Well, and I think a lot of folks, maybe that's just, they're not comfortable with hey, look, you're a human and you have an entire life. It's not just your work life. And
their perspective can be compartmentalized.
Yeah, totally.
Like here, your work you, and at home, your home you.
Yeah, totally.
And I've done a 180 in my career. So when I was a younger leader, like in my mid-20s, I thought sharing something about my personal life made me vulnerable.
Yep.
And vulnerability, that's a hard word to say, vulnerability was a weakness.
Yep. Well, especially as women, I feel like that can be a hard thing. Like maybe you'll get called out on podcasts for crying if you're like, a woman and emotional. But okay. I do think that that's part of it, at least for me, is that it can feel like it can be weaponized at some point.
Well, and for me, I just looked at it like it makes me look like I'm not working because I'm talking personally. Yeah. So it was about the perception of like, you're here to work, you just work. So you don't have like the water cooler conversation. Like, and when I would walk down the hall, it was like for purpose. And I would say hello and I would be polite, but I wasn't allowing anyone into my life personally. And nor was I reaching into their life because I felt like it was a waste of company resource to do that. Wow. I'm there to work. So the feedback that I received from a lot of people was, very icy, very robotic, very machine-like. And I am still like that in how I put process together and how I think about working. But I've realized, and that just takes time in a career, that humanizing situations and allowing vulnerability and showing your team that you're a real person, you actually get more out of your team that way.
Oh, for
so
sure.
It's okay to share with them what's happening in your life and be interested and want to nurture them through whatever they're going on in their life, because it creates a bond. And when you have a bond with your team, your turnover becomes way less, because it's really hard for them to leave when they get that emotional fulfillment with their job, not simply the paycheck and the technical part of their job, the kudos on that as well. So I'm trying to create bonds with my team that are lifelong. I mean, I care about Sarah and I care about you and I care about Pepper over here. Pepper Pat over here as people, not just simply as members of our MB2 family.
Yeah, that's really special.
You have a lot of really good not advice. You have a lot of really good points that you make in what makes you a good leader and how your leadership has evolved over the years. But if you were talking to somebody new to a leadership position, I think sometimes associates stepping into ownership, or, a doctor figuring out how to mentor associates and lead associates versus staff, what advice would you give to somebody who is trying to figure out their leadership identity?
I think getting on a regular cadence or routine is important. Like, all right, we do a team meeting, and no matter what happens, we do a team meeting. Like, for example, Dr. V, our leadership team gets together every Monday from 9:30 to 12. I mean, it's weekly. And that's a few hours to take out of your day starting on a Monday. But we understand as a leadership team, it's so important to have that time together, whether it's talking strategy or the next iteration of MB2 or checking in with each other in those departments. So you've got to create like a routine, whether it's your one-on-ones or your team meeting, and you need to keep that consistent. If you keep canceling and rescheduling and leapfrogging around the schedule, then it loses its value. Yeah. And then you've also got to figure out how you are able to make people understand your expectations through writing it down or posting it and having those verbal conversations. Because if you're clear with someone and you're like, hey, this is what I expect of you, and here it is on paper, and when you fall out of line, we reference this back. And if you keep falling out of line, you're probably not the right person for this job.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with your kids. Like, Joe, you've got 5 kids. If you allow your kids to get in the cookie jar all the time, and then all of a sudden one day you're like, no, you can't get in the cookie jar, they're going to be like, oh, whatever, Dad. Like, who cares?
Exactly.
But if they get in the cookie jar the first time, you're like, no, you don't get in the cookie jar.
You slap their hand.
You slap their hand, and then you're like, they're like, oh, okay, I can't do that. So it's about getting clear. So you've got to get some like getting clear expectations, get everybody's roles aligned, have that regular cadence of meeting, be vulnerable, share some things about yourself, give public praise and some behind the scenes criticism, constructive feedback. The team is going to then feel they're in a safe environment because they trust you. They know what to expect. They don't need to act out because they know their needs are going to be met. And that's kind of like same thing, Joe, you know, with parenting as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And treated fairly, right? I can't do, although I want to give my 5-year-old whatever she wants because she's the most special, amazing thing I've ever
And she's
encountered.
probably so cute.
But my 13-year-old boy, like he's kind of stinky and rude, and I'm like, but the rules that everything has to be consistent, right?
Yeah.
And fair, right?
Yeah.
Whatever exactly that means.
So what you're saying is parents do have favorites.
Oh my God, yes, I do. I'm not afraid to admit it. 5-year-old Tula is my favorite.
Yeah,
I'll bring a picture next time. Susan, you've been in dentistry for a long time, right? You've seen a lot of change. You were at a DSO before that was a really kind of a common thing. Now there's like 200, right? What do you think the future of dentistry is, or what is dentistry going to look like in 10 years?
I hope it looks like MB2. I mean, because when I grew up in this DSO environment for the 11 or 12 years, like I mentioned earlier, like I was well trained, but I was responsible for affecting a practice in a way in which a dentist owner could affect a practice. And so I hope the future of dentistry is the MB2 model. And I'm saying that because I have perspective on private practice, DSO, and us. So I'm very proud of my dental past. I don't have any regrets, or I don't feel ashamed that I've worked at a DSO or even at a private practice to get started. But the ownership of the dentist and the autonomy for decision making and keeping control of the practice and taking advantage of the larger organization operationally or for financial outcomes, I think that is what we're trying to do at MB2, just make an impact on the industry. When we think about dentistry, the MB2 should be synonymous with dentistry. And right now it's a little bit, it's private practice, it's DSO, it's DPO,
Pocketed.
which, it's all pocketed. But as we move forward and MB2 continues to grow, or maybe there will be some successful DPOs that start up that can mimic our model. And that's great. Because I think what Dr. V's mission has been is to change dentistry, not just simply create MB2 as like a large, consolidated group. So I hope my impact into our organization is actually impactful into, an industry.
Absolutely.
So I think the future is the MB2 model.
I like that. Dr. V's focus has been on maintaining the integrity of the dental industry. And so it's not like this cheering for people to fail. It's like if you can do both, if you can be successful and maintain the integrity of dentistry, then that's great. We want more people along for the ride.
Yeah, he's always opened the doors too. Like, come on over. Like, look what's going on. We'll share with you what we've got in terms of best practices, like, our lessons learned. Like, I know that we've invited people to podcasts or even just meetings here. So we've been an open door to the industry to learn from us.
Yeah.
There's still the old school thinking. It's a little bit grating when you think about the larger DSOs that maybe aren't doing as well and, maybe are a little intimidated by the younger, more nimble, agile group like ours. But we have good intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the industry. It's not just about MB2. It's bigger than that.
Before we wrap up, you have been a part of MB2 for 9 years. I think that's the math.
Yes. May 4th, 2015.
Specifically.
Yes.
What is like a favorite memory you have from like an MB2 event or some sort of engagement with MB2? We usually ask doctors that come on like your favorite memory at like an MB2 owner's trip or something like that. What would be yours?
So I think it's a little bit of what happens at every event. I will have owners come up to me and give me a hug and say, "You're the reason why I joined MB2."
Wow, I love it.
And everybody has different reasons, whether they want to de-risk, They want to get some operational support. They want to grow and have more locations. They want to pull back and have an exit strategy. But because the integration, it's not me. When they say me, they don't really mean me. They mean like the integration team,
Yes,
probably
they do.
the BD team.
Probably the BD team.
Probably the BD team. But I'll have owners come up and give me a hug and just say, you're the reason why I've joined MB2. And I think the you is a collective integration you, because we made it for them where they didn't lose their team. And that's their biggest worry.
Every time.
And sure, it's disruptive, it's bumpy. There's going to be clunky things that happen, like with, changing vendor billing or updating electronic funds transfer or smoothing out a PTO policy or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we approached it from a very humanized way, and it wasn't overly corporate, and it wasn't overly, it wasn't overly intimidating.
Right.
And they're happy now, right? Because they're getting the support of the larger organization and they're getting the financial outcomes of the larger organization. But the process wasn't as painful, as scary as they may have thought it would be. So I think at every owner's event, I will have sometimes a lot, sometimes a few, depending on what the event is, come up and say, you're the reason why I joined MB2, whether I talked to them pre-LOI or because of the process. So that makes me really proud that they're not only happy with the results of MB2, but I had a little bit to do with them making the decision, sort of making it all the way to the finish line to become our partner.
Right.
That's very fulfilling. That's cool.
Okay.
Good for you.
Wrap us up.
Susan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We
Yes,
appreciate
this
you
has been
taking time.
fun.
Absolutely.
Anything you want to add that we didn't talk about?
I have one little story, and this is sort of my motivator for work.
Both of us just settled in. We're like, all
they're
right,
like,
hit
okay,
us.
they're like, let's hit us. And I probably told this to you guys before, but it's you have moments in your life where your trajectory changed, and I think you each can experience that. Where you're like, you had something to click in your brain, or you made a decision, and your life went like that way. So, like becoming a parent for me, like I remember the exact moment that I became a parent in the process of being pregnant and having it. Like I remember it clicked in my brain.
You're like, I'm officially no longer not a parent.
Yeah, like I'm a parent. And it was very powerful, and it was life-changing. It was like my brain went in a different direction. Yeah. So when I was 10 years old, my neighbor across the street, her name was Debbie Smith. She was married and had 2 kids around the ages of my siblings. She said, Susan, do you want to come over and help me clean my house? Well, I'm a firstborn. I want to be put to work. I like to people please. I like routine. I like chores. And so I was like, I would love to, because I like to organize other people's things.
Yes, please let me clean.
Yes, please. And so I went across the street and I helped her clean her house. And she took a check out of her checkbook and she ripped it out. And I can clearly remember the rip out of the checkbook.
Yep.
And she put it in her typewriter and she typed my name, Susan Huff. And I think it was like $10 with the date. And then she pulled it out and she signed it.
Wait, I'm sorry. This was the time of typewriters are really not that old.
No.
Why do I feel like typewriters are from like the 20s?
I was writing high school papers in the 90s.
With
on
a typewriter?
Yes.
With a typewriter.
Yes.
Okay, pardon my naivete.
Our Joe and I, our homes, probably everyone in our generation, our home had a typewriter. Because remember, we grew up before computers,
But when you just
pre-technology.
right?
No, we
On the
typed.
check?
We typed our papers out for school. We typed
click,
click 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 click.
Okay.
So she put a check in there and typed this out, and she pulled it out and signed it and handed it to me, and that was my first paycheck.
How much was it?
It was $10.
For cleaning her house?
Yeah, it was awesome, and
You remember the feeling?
I remember the feeling. I was like, I worked hard
I earned this.
and I earned it, and it was and I went, and my parents helped me open up like a little checking or savings account, the bank, where you had to go in and they stamped in your deposits. I had a little bank book. And from there, I've never stopped working. So babysitting or cleaning houses leading up to getting my first W-2 job. And so it was that moment in my 10-year-old brain that clicked that said, I like working.
That's
and
so
I
cool.
just want to keep working.
And I like the
it's
fulfillment
the
that comes
fulfillment.
with
Yeah,
it.
I mean, yes, it was great to get a paycheck and have my little savings account, so I could when I got older, buy my own CDs and that kind of thing. But that was the moment. So it's kind of neat, and I encourage you guys to just think back at those pivotal things that changed your brain and sort of made you who you were.
No,
the
that's
office
special.
bra, everybody.
Office bra.
Yeah,
Well, again, Susan, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This was awesome.
this has been fun.
Yeah,
do it
thank you so
again.
much.
Thanks, and I'm proud of you guys.
Hey, thank
I'm
you.
very
Susan.
proud.
We made
appreciate
Mama
that.
proud.
That means
Yes,
a lot
you
to both of
did.
us.
I said mama.
Yes.
Listeners, thank you so much for joining us for another great episode of the MB2 Underground podcast. We will catch you next time.
See you on the flip.
On the flip.